So hello, everybody. Thanks a lot for coming to our Botany360 Graduate Fellowship Writing Panel. It's hosted by the BSA Early Career Professional Development Committee. And again, I want to let everybody know that we're recording this event to be posted on BSA's website. Uh, so there has sort of unsurprisingly, I guess, given the funding climate lately, been a lot of interest in this event. And I was pleased to see that we have a pretty diverse group of people attending, interested in applying, not just for the GRFP, but for a pretty broad range of fellowships. So while this panel is going to have kind of a general focus on the GRFP application, I think that a lot of the questions and answers that we've had submitted are going to be broadly helpful to anybody who's preparing an application this year. All right, so with that stuff being said, I need to get a few announcements out of the way on behalf of Botanical Society of America. So first, I want to mention that this is a Botany 360 event. Botany 360 is a series of programming that connects our botanical community during the 360 days outside of botany conferences. The goal of this program is to connect the plant science community throughout the year with professional development, discussion sessions, and networking and social opportunities. Be sure to follow Botanical Society of America on social media for notifications of events that we have going on throughout the year. And I'm going to go ahead and put a link to the Botany 360 homepage in the chat. You'll be able to check out upcoming events there and also see a recording of this and previous Botany 360 events that we've recorded. All right. Next, if you are not a member of the Botanical Society of America, absolutely fine, but I encourage you to join. Membership is just $25 for students, $40 for postdocs, unless those numbers have been updated. I didn't actually check right before I wrote this. And there are discounts for members in developing nations. You just need to contact Amelia Neely at aneely@botany.org if you need financial assistance for a membership. And I will throw that in the chat. Sorry, the chat's going to be really full of links. I'm going to try to get through these as quick as I can. All right. Finally, Botany 2026 is going to be taking place next year from August 1st to 5th in Tucson, Arizona. It's still a long way off, so registration isn't open yet. But I will go ahead and also put that URL into the chat. There's going to be one more after this, and then I promise I'm done for a minute. All right. Last one. I'm also going to put a link in for a post-attendance survey. If you have time, please fill it out. It'll help us better tailor our upcoming Botany 360 events to our botany community. All right, that is it for links. And I think go ahead and start by having each of our panelists just briefly introduce yourself, say where you're at, and if you're one of the, I'll call your names out too, so you don't have to like try to talk over each other. And then if you submitted a GRFP, right? If you're a GRFP recipient, maybe briefly talk about like what you're studying, or what that was for. I'm going to start with Mike. You were here first, so you get to introduce yourself first.
Great. Well, thanks everybody for the invitation. I'm really happy to be here. I'm Michael Anderson. I'm from Wake Forest University. It's in North Carolina. And I'm broadly a savanna ecologist. So I study the plants, the animals, soils, fire, climate, and all relevant sort of ecosystem processes in African savannas. I have been a GRFP panelist a few times, and I also back in the Cretaceous, I got a GRFP. It's a completely different process now. So, but I have gone through this experience, and I've sat in your shoes, so I know what it feels like. And yeah, I'm just here. I'm really thrilled to be able to provide any guidance that I can.
All right. Next, I'm gonna have Sally introduce yourself, if you don't mind.
Yep. Hi, I am Sally Chambers. I'm an assistant professor at Eastern Kentucky University, and I'm the herbarium curator there as well. So lots of botanical activity, and my research focuses on basically plant distributions, and I predominantly work on ferns and rare plants as well, in all kinds of capacities. And I was a GRFP honorable mention, but I have also served as a panelist in, I don't know, it hasn't been super recent, but somewhat recent. So I do have some insight from kind of the other side of the application process as well.
Also, sorry, they're like drilling in the room above me right now. I hope you can't hear it. It's not obnoxious. Okay, great. Super obnoxious to me, but I'm glad it's not on the recording. All right. Next, I'm going to have Juliana introduce yourself, please.
Absolutely. It's great to be here and be here with you all. My name is Julianna Harden. I'm a first year PhD student at Cornell University, and I received the GRF last year. My proposal was just about looking at the fungal endophyte diversity of cacao, which is the chocolate tree. And then I wanted to also look at its function in agroforestry systems across Latin America. And some of the aims that I had were to document the endophytic diversity of the cacao tree and then assess some of the interacting influences of the cacao genotype with endophytic fungal communities. And then lastly, to kind of describe how those endophyte communities are acting when it comes to the plant growth and susceptibility to fungal pathogens in those systems.
Thank you. All right. Next, I think we have Savanna Brown.
Yes, hello everyone. It's great to be here. I'm Savanna Brown. I am a third year PhD student at the University of Connecticut. I just received my GRFP last year, so I was in your shoes just about a year ago today. I am very much not a botanist. I study insects, but as you can maybe see behind me, studying insects means they need food. So I inherently have to sort of at least keep plants alive, even if I don't know as much about them as all of you. My GRFP broadly was on what I study, which is looking at novel genes in insects and how novel genes are incorporated into the genome to produce new traits. But I'm happy to be here and hope that this is helpful for all of you.
And then I think Cynthia just got here also, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Cynthia Webster. I am now a fourth year PhD student. I'm in the University of Connecticut too with Savannah. And I got my GRFP a couple years ago, specifically focused on conservation genomics and pangenomics. My research varies, but I focus primarily on endangered tree species. So for my GRFP, I wrote about the butternut, which is native to North America and affected by a non-native fungal pathogen. And we're essentially just leveraging what we know about butternut and its close relative Japanese walnut, which is more resistant, and their hybrids, which are also more resistant, and doing a big comparative analysis. Oh, and thanks for inviting me. I'm excited to help on the panel.
Thank you for coming. All right. Well, before I guess I open it up to the panel and start asking some of the questions that you guys submitted, we got a lot of questions, again, probably unsurprisingly, prior to the solicitation being released this year about differences in this year's GRFP. And I want to preface this by saying I am not representing the NSF in any official capacity. And I recommend that everybody read the solicitation very carefully this year for themselves. But it seems like the main differences this year are that second year grad students are unfortunately no longer eligible. Also, and this is wrong in the guide that I sent everybody, official transcripts are required this year. So make sure that you figure out if you're applying what you need to do to get official transcripts from your university. Probably start that process early. Other than that, right, there are different deadlines and there are some subtle changes to formatting. Mostly it's more permissive in like fonts you use and stuff. But the acceptable topics in life sciences are essentially unchanged, is my understanding. An NSF representative is unfortunately not able to join us this year, but we do have a recording of last year's NSF workshop up on the Botany360 website, and a lot of that information is still going to be applicable to people who are preparing GRFPs specifically. They go really into depth kind of about each section and what should be in it, and to my knowledge, none of that has really changed this year. All right. So with that, I think I can stop talking and ask our panelists some questions. And I want to start off with, I've kind of tried to order these. We got a lot of the same questions over and over again, so I've tried to put the ones that we got a lot at the beginning. And first of all, kind of generally, from a reviewer standpoint, right? What do you think sort of stands out in an application to you? Like, is there something that you see right off the bat, that you appreciate people putting in? And alternatively, is there anything in particular that makes you less likely to recommend an application for funding? And I don't know, you can go in whichever order.
Sally, do you want me to start first? Okay. So I think it's a great question, looking for that sort of silver bullet or that one thing to put in. But unfortunately, I don't think that exists. Personally, I think there is no one format, there is no sort of one approach or characteristic of a GRFP that is going to like make it an amazing submission from the beginning. I think what matters from the perspective of the reviewer is the body of work. Okay, are you communicating everything you've done in science, all your engagement, all your excitement about your project, what you've done in your past, what you plan to do in your future? Do you have good letters? I mean, it's really building a portfolio on behalf of yourself. I mean, you are, in a way, you're the broader impact, and you're really trying to sell all the work you've done. You've done a lot of work up to now, leverage it. So unfortunately, there's no single one thing, but you should work in order to have a really streamlined and like a narrative that clearly communicates to reviewers why you deserve this award. Obviously, if you have publications or really important research experience or formative personal experience that belong in there, leverage that. But certainly, I have recommended very, very different types of proposals for different reasons. And I'll let Sally sort of talk next about her experience.
Yeah, I completely agree. And my time serving as a reviewer on the GRFP, I felt like we were very much advised to consider the applicant themselves. So not just the research, like your research does need to be sound and it needs to, have good background information. And the more that you can talk about your personal experiences, why you're interested in that research, why that research would be successful, then like the better your application. But also there was a strong emphasis on funding the individual. So this is kind of going back to dovetailing with what Mike said was, what are your experiences? What has your research kind of, or your personal experiences led you to in terms of the research that you're applying to get funded? But then also, what are some things that set you as an individual apart from other applicants? What are some maybe different things in your background that might set you apart and make you a little bit more unique or more worthy of the funding? Because they are, I think, from NSF's mind, and also just like David said, I'm not an NSF representative and I'm not speaking on behalf of NSF, but they really are wanting to fund people that will have a long legacy in science and will be building on these research ideas that they're formulating at a younger age and then will kind of carry with them throughout their careers.
Thanks. And I want to actually ask the students also if there was any feedback that you got either from, I know a lot of people, right, and apply a couple of different years. So if there's feedback you got from NSF reviewers, or, from other people that you thought was particularly helpful on your applications.
Yeah, I can go first. So this is a very timely question because the reviews from last year just came out earlier this week. And I'll more so speak towards a negative critique, and it's more so on format. One of the reviewers said, I do disagree with using italicized, underlined, and bolded sections for emphasis as they may confuse the reviewer. So she said, or they said, just stick with bolded if you want to emphasize something in there. So just be mindful of the formatting, the syntax that you use within your document.
I don't have too much more to add. I feel like in terms of developing a great research proposal, I agree that it does come down to the person, and that was pretty established in the reviews that I got. Like they were excited to see what I had done as a student and not so much emphasizing the importance of my research, but like the overall theme of everything that I presented across my personal and research statement and my CV and publications and all of that. But I will say, I think a big thing is it needs to be feasible if you're gonna, write about research. For example, for me, I had some funding coming in to do like my big pangenome project, which is very expensive. I don't think they'd be as happy to support me if I didn't have the capacity to do any of it from the get-go, but I could be wrong. I don't know if the reviewers have opinions on that and the feasibility of your research going in.
Yeah, I mean, an important component of any proposal is feasibility, but I think at the GRFP stage, it's a little less important than at the full NSF proposal stage. I agree with what Sally said. NSF is investing in scientists, in future scientists, and whether particular details of your proposal are going to work out or not, I think aren't as important as this sort of body of work that you're building up and sort of leveraging in your application. Whereas later on, when you submit an NSF proposal, it will be all about that. It'll be all about feasibility and details, and have you demonstrated that these experiments or studies have the potential for success. So yes, it's important, but don't be afraid to think big and propose exciting ideas, and with obviously some limits to to what you're willing to propose in a two-page proposal, and for a PhD project, certainly.
I was just going to add, so I actually, my reviews are not released yet from last year, so I don't have my own reviews to look at yet. But one thing I will just say that I think might help with what all the other panelists are saying that I agree with is this is a big focus on funding an individual as a person versus just looking at your research project. And one thing to keep in mind with that is that, as you know, applying and collecting all your materials, your full application package is a really big package of stuff, right? It's the 2 full big statements, transcripts. I think you put work history, there's all the boxes that you have to fill in on the application page. Make it as easy as possible as you can for the reviewer to understand your whole package and who you are as a full package, right? If you're going to claim XYZ is really important to me, show them how have you shown that in the past, how are you showing that now, what do you plan to do in the future to show that, and make all of those connections as clear as you possibly can for a reviewer who is looking at a really big package of information about you in a relatively short time, and they're doing so in the context of going through a lot of applications, right? So I think my like one of my biggest pieces of advice to people is always just don't assume that they can make a ton of connections because they don't know you. So you have to really get yourself across clearly in this package of materials. So really try to be clear and intentional about making those connections of why you're the whole package.
All right. This should be a little kind of quicker one to answer, I think. I mean, a simpler question, I suppose. Do you have thoughts on when to apply? A lot of people are interested in if it makes more sense for them to apply as an undergraduate, or wait until, they're in grad school. I think it's a little different now that you're not allowed to apply your second year. Um, but I guess from the reviewer's perspective, right, does it make any difference to you if somebody's applying, say, as an undergraduate with maybe no publication history or less experience kind of doing research or less ideas about what they want to do, versus somebody applying that's already in grad school? And then I think I don't know if any of our GRFP recipients applied in grad school versus undergrad. It seems like maybe all in grad school, but I'd be interested to hear when you applied also.
Sally, you want to tackle that one first, and then I'll follow up?
Sure, that sounds good. I guess, you know, for me, like, I don't view a whole lot of difference between somebody coming out of their senior year of undergrad, you know, or applying in the fall of their undergrad versus the fall of their first year of grad school. So a lot of people could start grad school, and in that semester, you're getting used to a new institution, you're getting used to, you know, just new people, a new place to live, different expectations of you as a grad student, and you might still be formulating those ideas around what your PhD research is. So from my perspective, if I got an application from somebody, you know, coming out of their senior year, they're not accepted into a grad school yet, but if they had a very clear, again, personal message and this story of, you know, they're really interested in these topics and they've done X, Y, and Z items to get them exposed to the field and to gain these experiences. And then they're proposing a dissertation, you know, with these 3 different chapters that very clearly follow that narrative. I would personally find that very impressive. And so I think it's really tricky, again, like David said, with the not being able to apply in your second year, because a lot, you know, there's just not a lot of window if you haven't been able to get a lot of that significant research and kind of exposure in your undergrad formative years to kind of shape your narrative going into grad school. That could be really tricky. That said, it's entirely possible that people have graduated, gone into the workforce for a little bit, you know, maybe they're working for an agency, or in other capacities. And then in that process, they're coming up with ideas, and then they can start grad school and they've got, you know, these great ideas lined out. That's entirely possible too. So everybody's in different positions a little bit and in different boats, especially when it comes to grad school. Not everybody's just right into grad school straight out of undergrad. So I think just going back again to focusing on like, what is your personal narrative? How have your experiences shaped you and really helped you focus on the type of research and scientist that you want to be? I think all of that is very, very important to include in your packet, and to consider. But in terms of like evaluating between the two, I don't know that I would necessarily have much of a difference, except for somebody that did have that. If there was like a big gap, you know, between undergrad and grad school, I would take that into consideration. And so it's, again, just, it's going to be different from individual to individual for sure.
Yeah. I guess the only thing I would add to that, and Sally, I mean, I totally agree with everything you said. Well, maybe a clarifying question first. If you apply, like I guess I'm not sure on the rules since they've changed. If you apply your senior year of your undergrad, are you still allowed to apply again as a first-year grad student?
Yes,
Okay.
that is
Well,
something I
then,
wanted to mention is that,
okay.
I don't think there are limits on applying before, but once you've started grad school, you can only apply once.
Right.
Yeah.
So then the recommendation is always apply as an undergrad. If you're still an undergrad and you're on this panel, go through the process. It's an excellent experience. Going through the experience of writing a full proposal like this is incredibly formative. Okay, and you will learn, and you will. Yes, it's competitive, and you know, but what an advance, what a step ahead you have once you get into grad school, and then now you get to resubmit. So as long as no rules have changed in terms of penalizing undergrads, I would say always submit as an undergrad if you can't and can get it together, and then you know, there's no penalty for that. And I think it's very, very formative as an experience. there's some other related things about when to apply and how to apply that are related to identifying a mentor and sort of a PI and like how to go through that process. And I don't know if that's going to come up, David, in further questions, or are there questions related to that? Because, you know, think about it. Once you're in grad school, you've already decided who you've committed to. Whereas an undergrad, you know, you don't necessarily, they're not asking you to make that commitment yet.
No, I mean, I think that's a good point to bring up. And we don't have a question exactly like that, but the sort of next kind of general question before we get more specifically into research statements does have to do with, you know, who do you get feedback from and like who do you approach, yeah, as a mentor for these things? Right? Like how do you find mentors and how do you find people to give you feedback on your application as you're preparing it, sort of?
Yeah, so this is exactly what I was talking about. I think a very important step, if you are still an undergrad, is identifying the correct mentor and lab group that is going to help ensure success, not only, you know, during your PhD as a whole, but to execute your GRFP that you propose. So you want to work with, you know, where are these ideas coming from? What is the body of literature that you are sort of reading and the gaps that you're trying to fill with your research project? You know, who are the who do you see as the main sort of PIs in the field that are really doing that research? Reach out to them. Maybe you're already working with someone on a GRFP in a collaborative way. But I think it's very important to sort of establish that kind of relationship and that mentor-mentee relationship early and work with someone on the proposal. They can help you. And then just be cognizant that if you are working with someone on a proposal, you know, you need to be very clear with them if you plan on applying somewhere else, because often those can be, you know, ideas that you know, are unique or belong to, if you will, to the PI. So I think you need to be very aware, and you need to have those open conversations about, you know, where are these ideas coming from, and are you gonna, you know, try to commit to that person's lab. So yeah, I mean, I think these are really important first steps. Yeah, I guess that's just a really important, you know, part of that process. I realize that if you're an undergrad, NSF isn't asking you to commit to a lab, but I do think it's an important part of the proposal to, you know, to say, you know, that, you know, this is the body of work that I'm gonna fill, and this is a lab that I propose to work with. I'd be interested to hear the recent recipients if they explicitly identified a lab during their in their proposals. I would be interested to hear that.
Yeah, I was interested if any of you applied as undergraduates and yeah, if so, how you maybe approached, yeah, identifying a lab or clarifying your research. And if none of you did, that's fine too.
So I can go. I actually applied as a lab tech. I took a 2-year gap season, is what I call it, between undergrad and graduate school. And I applied during my second year as a lab tech. And I will say I did include a team of mentors that I had spoken with at the university that I was a lab tech with, or a lab tech at. And I specifically identified those faculty members and then how they would help me achieve what I was proposing in my research proposal.
Yeah, to me, that's quite important, and it's part of this. That's almost a more important part of the feasibility part. You know, is there a really good fit between you and the lab group that you're kind of proposing to work with? I do think, and often, you know, those are individuals who are also going to be your letter writers, and you know, the letters of reference, they are critical to your application. And if I don't get a chance to say it again, I want to say it now. Be sure and communicate with the people you are asking to write you letters, and ensure that they are going to write you an excellent letter of reference. I think especially undergrads might, ask a faculty member, hey, can you write a letter for me, and then stop the conversation there. I think you need to have the full conversation about, well, what do you know about me, or what sort of experiences have we had together that you're able to write about? Because you want to make sure that letter reflects you in the best possible light and shows, all your strengths. And so I think it's important to choose those letters of reference carefully, and then have the conversation about, what are they able to say about you, and make sure that those really, to leverage your strengths.
Sorry, I'm muted. Nobody else has anything else to say about that. I think we can get into talking about the research plan a little bit. People are interested in how you developed your aims, and so I guess we can maybe start with the graduate students on this one, right? How you developed your aims, and maybe how specific your aims were. And then also sort of for the graduate students, and then maybe after they get a chance to talk about this, some of the reviewers, how important is it that your aims are sort of framed as testable hypotheses? And I'll open it up to the grad students first.
I can start off. So I would say, as far as forming aims go, for me it was having a project already in mind and kind of having a general idea of what kind of questions I want to answer, but then really working on nailing down. I think I ended up having 2 aims total. And certainly I think for a lot of us, you can probably think of a lot more than just a couple, but really trying to nail down some concrete ideas that come across very clearly what you are trying to do. And then this kind of goes into the second part of the question, but then making sure that there is a way when you're writing your aim, like that you feel like you can write about a measurable, like a way to measure if you have achieved the aim or not. And I know for me, some of that was difficult because a lot of genomic work is in some ways exploratory, where you don't necessarily have a really concrete hypothesis of this is what I'm going to find, but really trying to work with that and working with your mentors and advisor and whoever you're working with on having something that's it's very clear, this is what I'm trying to find out, this is how I'm going to do it, and this is how I will know if I found that out or not. Like having that structure in mind. And it might mean that you have to cut precious material from your proposal, which is always really hard with such little space. But sticking to the core, those core aims, core questions that get at the core of your project, I think is really important in the aims.
I can go next. So I applied for the GRFP in my second year, and I'm sorry if anybody was in their second year. I feel pretty lucky. But point being, I was working off of the previous work that I had done, and I found as I was writing my personal statement, I wanted a natural segue into my research proposal. So I had done a lot of software development in bioinformatics, but also had a lot of experience working with all these different endangered tree species and plants. And I had this ongoing collaboration with the Forest Service that would allow me to conduct my research. So being one of the chapters in my PhD, I thought it would be wisest to write about that. And I think it's going to be a little bit different if you're an undergraduate, because you don't necessarily have, a strong research mentor. Like I worked very much with my PI because we wanted to establish a plan that was going to work for me and her and like others in the lab, if we could even continue on. Were there broader impacts? Is it going to benefit society? Was there any novelty to it? I think these kind of things came to mind as I was developing aims. Likewise, can I even do it within the 5 years and the 3-year salary that they give us was really important to me because I wanted to be able to finish what I said I was going to do.
Maybe I'll just chime in and say, as a reviewer, I think there was a question about how important is it to propose those as testable hypotheses. Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to write like a scientist, think like a scientist, like show that you're not just, like throwing out some, crazy harebrained ideas that sound exciting, but I mean, and again, this is back to this feasibility thing. Whether you end up doing that or not is not the point, but can you think and construct hypotheses and ideas like a scientist and make it, exciting at the same time? I mean, I do think that's kind of an important feature of any proposal.
So, really quick, I also want to ask, as far as writing the research statement, what weight do you give to sort of methods versus background? And I think from, grad students, I mean, how did you write it? Was it kind of 50-50, like half background, and you tried to give a lot of methods? And for reviewers, how important is it that the students have the methods that they're going to use to kind of test these aims figured out in advance? Yeah.
At the risk of talking too much, I mean, do one of the grad students want to talk first, maybe? I mean, I have a lot to say about this point.
I can say just kind of a quick thing is I think I got a lot of different advice from people on like how far to go into background versus methods and whatever, which sometimes can be a little bit difficult to parse. But my understanding and what I ended up landing on, again, like I've kind of said a few times, I guess, is you want things to be really really clear. So giving enough background and enough methodology that somebody reading this for the first time understands that you have a solid understanding of how you're going to answer your questions. You don't need to give them every single detail of every single method you'll use, but you do need to demonstrate that it's very well thought through and structured. And I think, like Cynthia mentioned, that this is a feasible project from start to finish, which might be a kind of a vague answer and hard to interpret, but you want to give enough, that someone can follow your project through start to finish and envision that working. And I think I'll just quickly throw back to like kind of some of the previous questions. I think that's one area that it's important to get someone to review your proposal that has not been working on it with you the whole time, and making sure that to somebody who hasn't been thinking about the project for a long time like you have, or your advisor, that they see that all the way through, tracked through in your writing.
And I just wanted to add, I was looking at my research proposal. In terms of length, it looks like I did a third background, a third methods, and a third intellectual merit and broader impacts. But I did also include a figure kind of summarizing everything. I think that helps a lot. Like, think about including a figure. In terms of background, like Savanna was saying, it should be sufficient enough for the reviewers who are less familiar with your system or method to understand. Like, I've heard people just send their application to like their parents and see if they can even understand it, and that's something that could help. Or maybe whoever's writing your letter of recommendation, definitely send it to them if they're in different disciplines or departments. Yeah, that's all I wanted to add.
So Sally and I can attest to the fact that these panels are incredibly diverse in terms of expertise and background. And what is really important to know is that your proposal will almost be certainly read by someone outside of your field. So for example, I may get, I'm an African savanna ecologist. I'm reading proposals and I'm going to make some stuff up here about manatees, about, forest fires in North America, about seabird demography. I mean, like all over the board, because I, am on that panel at that particular time, and I have enough expertise to judge some of the research of these candidates. But what those grad students said is very important. It has to be tractable, accessible, and understandable to somebody outside of your specific field. And then when you roll the dice and you do get that expert botanist, it better be robust and it better stand up to scrutiny. So it's gotta be both. It's gotta be both broad and accessible to a wide range of biologists. And when, what are the absolute essential methods that anyone in your field must know in order to judge feasibility.
Yeah, I fully agree with all of that. It needs to be well understood. Like, it needs to be stated in a way that it's easy to read, easy to digest, easy to understand. But then also, you know, it's entirely possible too that, if you're proposing, for instance, something ecological, you could have a variety of ecologists on your panel, and they might look at something like your sample size or your proposed statistical analyses. So they do need to see that you've thought through a tangible way, as the grad students have mentioned, to address this problem that you're proposing, and that you've thought through the methods and the analytical ways that you're going to go and approach those questions that you're proposing as well. And then ideally, hopefully some of your personal experiences can back that up and kind of demonstrate further as well that you've done some of these things, how to work with these types of machines or collect these types of data. That would also be really impressive for the reviewers, in my opinion. So it does need to be a little bit of both, understandable, but also robust. And kind of to go back to what has been previously mentioned a little bit, like, we can't see into the future. So when I was a grad student, next generation sequencing was just coming to the forefront, And so I had a chapter in my dissertation that was about doing some of these, analytical methods, but at the time, when I was coming in out of undergrad straight into grad school, it wasn't even on my radar. We didn't even know, that this technology was kind of coming up and about, especially in terms of the botanical applications. So, that's entirely possible too, that you propose something, and even if you get funded, there could be technological advancements that allow you to even take it a little bit a step further, or do something a little bit more robust than even what you proposed. So just be aware of where things are with your field. I would say that, if you're doing molecular things, like, you don't need to list every R package that you're using, for instance, for your data analysis, but just tell people generally the analytical approaches that you're going to take, maybe a little bit about some of the instruments, just in case you do get that, that specialist on your review panel.
All right. I want to have one more question about research statements, and then we'll have a little bit of time for personal statements, and then we'll probably have to wrap this up. But I was wondering, what are some specific examples of things that people included in their intellectual merit and broader impacts? And specifically, we have a few people who are working in systematics and are interested, maybe from the reviewers, how you would suggest kind of writing broader impacts about things like systematics, right? That are maybe further from an application than other types of research. But yeah, if some of the grad students want to start and maybe just give like a concrete example again, if you're comfortable with it, of a broader impact, intellectual merit that you kind of threw into your proposal.
So I guess I can start. I remember one of the broader impacts that I included in my proposal was to advocate for the addition of an economic botany or a tropical fungi course through the Organization for Tropical Studies, which was an organization that I previously worked with. And then I said that I would volunteer to be a guest lecturer, highlighting the importance of my systems in an economic framework and to spotlight the biodiversity. So just like kind of tying it into how I will give back to the communities that have previously served me.
Going off of that, I know for mine, I also said that I was gonna participate, especially with the collaborators that I had for my research proposal. So for example, I was working with the USDA Forest Service, and I said that I would help develop a workshop to kind of go over what we were doing with the big project with Butternut. I also talked about a biodiversity training program that was developed, at least here at UConn, where we would recruit undergraduates to help me with my research and give them opportunities. And I also, because of the scope of my research proposal, said that I would develop like a next flow pipeline or something that was open source for people to use and reproduce what I did.
Yeah, I had kind of similar things to what was already said. Also, like I work in a non-model system, so kind of trying to explain how my workflow would be applicable to other non-model systems. And like Cynthia said, I think kind of touching on that question about phylogenetics or systematics folks, I think that's one really good way to connect, even if your result might not be adjacent to an immediate actionable thing. You know, making your process open access, writing a pipeline, something like Cynthia mentioned, I think is a really good way to do that.
Mike and Sally, have anything to add?
Yeah, so at this stage for the GRFP, I think broader impacts are probably one of the most challenging parts of the application. I think I would the first thing I would say is be reasonable and recognize that reviewers are not expecting you to, you know, solve all of the world's problems in your PhD. Do something focused, measurable, with the potential to judge whether it was successful or not, and that is a powerful broader impacts. And maybe now, David, so I have this list of sort of reviewer, like what a reviewer has to, you know, sort of a template that a reviewer is asked to fill out for every application that they review. And I can show participants what that list of questions is if you think that's appropriate. Now
Yeah,
might be a good time to do that since we're talking about intellectual merits and broader impacts.
Yeah, I mean, we still have a couple of minutes to focus on this. If you wanna put them up, I think you should be able to share your screen.
Okay.
As far as I know, it says one participant can share at a time.
Yeah, are you seeing that?
Yes.
Okay. So when, you know, when we're asked to review proposals, now this is true of sorry, are you seeing the presenter view?
Now we see the presenter view. Earlier it was we see the slide with the notes and everything, but
Okay, well hold on. I mean, let me just get out of this and then I'll just zoom in on this.
all right.
All right, so the NSF, so these are the questions that reviewers are asked to answer about every proposal. Now, this is true of whether it's a GRFP, an LTER, an LTREB, a full proposal, no matter what. I mean, these are the core kind of questions that NSF asks you to answer as a reviewer. So with respect to intellectual merits, how are activities going to advance knowledge and understanding within its own field or across different fields? Will the activities explore creative, original, or potentially transformative concepts? Is there a plan for carrying out the proposed activities? And does it incorporate a mechanism to assess success? How well qualified is the individual team or organization to conduct those activities? and are there adequate resources available to the PI to carry out those proposed activities. Now I'll switch to broader impacts. And you can see only one thing has changed. The last 4 questions are exactly the same as for broader impacts and intellectual merits. The only one that's changed is the first one, and that is, what is the potential for the proposed activity to benefit society or advance desired societal outcomes? So I told David that I would share these with the group, and I've made a PDF of those that he can send out to everyone. But those are, so those are the questions that we're asked to answer as reviewers. And with respect to broader impacts, again, staying focused. Are you going to impact society? Is there a mechanism to assess that? Keep it simple, and it doesn't have to, cure cancer. It has to be measurable and potentially transformative. Those are very important sort of buzzwords for NSF. So I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And yeah, I'll thank you for sending the PDF, and I'll work on either posting it with the recording of this or getting it sent out to participants. But I do think that's, very helpful to see what, we see from your end as a reviewer. All right, we still have a few minutes left, and I guess I want to spend them talking about personal statements. So obviously, generally, people are very interested in what sort of things go into a personal statement. But a couple questions that I thought summed it up kind of well were, one, how personal can I get? And how do I avoid turning a personal statement into an autobiography? And so I think that those kind of summed up the general consent, right, of what kind of things do you include in a personal statement? And again, I think we can start with the graduate students if that's all right.
I'll go first. When I was writing my personal statement, apparently I sounded too robotic. So they asked me to add like a little anecdote at the very beginning. I think it helped. Essentially, you're just trying to express your passion for science and what you do, and sound human, and then go on and hype yourself up for the rest of it and really emphasize everything that you're good at.
I 100% agree with Cynthia. You can get as personal as you want. I personally got super personal, but I just made sure to be very explicit in my successes, but also my failures along the way and how those have shaped me as a scientist, and how everything that I've gone through has fueled me to continue to want to pursue research in science.
Totally agree with both of those answers, and I totally agree. I think you can get as personal as you want, and if it's starting to feel like an autobiography, make sure that you make those connections again from, like, if you're telling them something, make the connection as to why did it fuel you in science, why did it fuel your outlook. Again, if you are passionate about, for example, for higher education or for recruiting underrepresented students and helping them get into the field, tell them why you feel that way, what you're doing to support that now, and what you want to do to support that. So just keep the thread through, but I think you can definitely get personal if that's what you want to do.
Sally and Mike, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I feel like from a reviewer perspective, I've seen kind of a gamut. But I do think that the biggest thing to consider is that you're talking about yourself as a scientist. So what are the experiences, even if you want to talk about things you experienced as a kid, right? Like for me personally, there are stories that my mom would tell me that I would do as a child with plants and, my personal experience as a kid. And so how were those kinds of things sparking your interest at a young age? And then how have you kind of taken those interests and those curiosities and then funneled them and shaped them through academic rigor and your other scientific experiences that you've had the opportunity to be a part of. And then if you have difficulties, I think it's a fair place to talk about them. But I think the biggest thing is to, again, make sure that you're talking about them kind of as they're shaping you as a scientist and like your desire to go to grad school, your desire to stay in the scientific field with whatever, interests and ignites you and sparks your passion. They do want to see that personal aspect of you. They're not going to want to know about what you ate for breakfast, right? But they're going to want to know about these things that are related to your scientific interests and why that is shaping your proposal and what you're submitting, for the GRFP.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to that. I think that was spot on.
All right. And so I guess the only other question really that I feel like we haven't covered with personal statements is how important is sort of highlighting research skills or experience in that? Like again, particularly for people who may be applying as undergrads and have less research experience. And I guess this would be a question for Sally and Mike mostly.
I would agree. I would say that you really want to highlight them. Even if you've had limited experience, tell the reviewers why. For me personally, I wasn't even really aware of research or research opportunities until I was a little bit further along in my undergrad. I was really interested in the botanical sciences, but it took me a while to get to the point where I realized and I was explicitly told, you need to consider research and you need to think about grad school and these kinds of things. And so tell the reviewers that information. Let them know a little bit, about your personal story in that regard.
Yeah,
Can I
absolutely.
come in?
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's basically when you are planning to have a motivation letter, basically, or a personal statement, I think the core element is to have your prior experience, what you have basically learned either during your master dissertation or any sort training workshop, what you have done during your undergraduate or masters, basically. So apart from the story, that it is better to tell about your experience, how good at your particular experimentation or field work or kind of analysis of anything that you can showcase so that you can impress the reviewer that you are quite qualified to attempt what you are proposing in your proposal, basically. So it is better to include your prior research experience. And if you have any short publication, maybe this kind of, popular article or kind of a news and that you have published so far, or somehow you have any kind of poster presentation or any kind of things that you have done so far prior to applying for NSF grant. So I think the prior experience is a core element. The student should include it in a very precise and very concrete manner. Thank you.
Yeah, and actually, you bring up another good point that I would like to ask really quick. That people were curious about how important it is to have a publication record, and maybe again, grad students, if you already had publications when you applied, or Sally and Mike, how common it is for students who are applying to have publications, right? I mean, is that kind of an essential thing to have, or
Well, if I could just say again, there's not a single formula for success in the GRFP. A publication is great. Okay, it's great. But if you don't have a publication and if you're not going to have one, don't worry. There are other things you can leverage in your application, and you need to double down on all those things. If you have one, talk about the experience in your personal statement and all the, and certainly in your research and cite it, and that's great. It's wonderful. But if you don't, it's not a dagger in the heart of your proposal, because there is no single formula. And I have certainly recommended funding for proposals in which students didn't have publications. So if you do, put it out there front and center, but if you don't, leverage your other skills and strengths.
all right. If nobody else has anything, it's 2 p.m. I really had hoped we'd get around to more question and answer. There are a lot of participants. We had a lot of questions to get through. And yeah, I hope this has been generally helpful. Again, I would really encourage people to check out the Botany360 website. I think I threw the link in the chat that has recordings of our previous years where we had people from the NSF really kind of dig down into each of these sections. And yeah, I really appreciate everybody attending. Thanks especially to all of our panelists for coming and answering these questions for us.